and welcome back to my crafting channel.
This is the place where we paint, sew and do all things DIY.
So hit that subscribe button and let's get crafting. Today I am going to show you how to make this lovely easy to sew summer dress. It doesn't require a commercial pattern at all. It has a fitted bodice created with shirring, simple shirred shoulder straps and a long flowing skirt part. This will be a step-by-step tutorial, just like I always make, guiding you through every part and giving you my best tips so you can create a similar dress for yourself. In addition to a sewing machine and basic sewing supplies, you will need fabric, matching thread and elastic thread. I highly recommend using a thin, lightweight and fluid fabric like viscose or lightweight cotton. To determine how much fabric you will need, start by taking your bust measurement. Make sure to measure at the fullest part of your bust. You will also need to decide on the desired length of your dress.
To find the correct width for your fabric piece or pieces, take your own bust measurement and multiply it by 1.5. For example, if your bust is 100 centimeters, your total fabric width needs to be 150 centimeters. If this total number is wider than your fabric, simply divide the measurement by 2 and cut 2 pieces, one front piece and one back piece. Since my fabric wasn't wide enough, I had to do this and cut 2 separate pieces.
You choose the length of the dress yourself, but make sure to add 6 centimeters or 2.5 inches extra for the hem and the top edge.
Now that you have all your measurements ready, it is time to lay out your fabric and cut your piece or pieces according to those numbers.
First, I zigzag the side edges on both the front and back pieces. Next, I fold in about 1 centimeter or 0.4 inches of the fabric on the upper edge of each piece. I press it with my iron and then I fold it in 1 more centimeter or 0.4 inches and press again. Then I sew a straight stitch across this upper edge. By doing this, the raw edge of the fabric is enclosed inside the fold and it won't risk fraying. Now, my front and back pieces are ready to be shirred. But before we start on the main pieces, I highly recommend making a quick test sample on a scrap piece of the same fabric. This way, you can make sure everything is working perfectly. Here is the sample I will be using.
I start by using a ruler to draw lines with a 1 centimeter or about 0.4 inches distance on the sample piece. I'm using a slightly sharper pen here, just so it's easier to see in the video, but when I draw lines on the real fabric later, I will use tailor's chalk. Once the lines are drawn, it is time to test sew. When you sew shirring, you use regular thread for your upper thread and elastic thread for your bobbin thread. This is a crucial part. The elastic thread must be wound by hand around an empty bobbin. It's very important not to wind it too tightly or too loosely. If it is too tight, it will have no stretch, and if it is too loose, it won't pull the fabric together. You then thread your machine and insert the bobbin just as usual.
Here you can see me test sewing on the sample. Now I'm intentionally sewing from the wrong side, just so you can clearly see how the stitches and the elastic appear. When I sew the real dress, the right side of the fabric piece will be facing up, so the elastic thread ends up on the underside and won't be visible. And here is how the sample turned out. I think the stitches look good and the 1 centimeter or 0.4 inches distance between each row of shirring feels like the perfect amount. A good distance is usually somewhere between 1 and 1.5 centimeters or somewhere between 0.4 and 0.6 inches. Now I draw my parallel lines on the right side of both the front and back pieces with that 1 centimeter or 0.4 inches distance using my tailor's chalk. I choose to start the first line 1 centimeter or 0.4 inches down from the upper edge. I will be sewing 28 rows of shirring on each fabric piece.
Now it's time to start sewing the shirring. A key thing about shirring is that you should never use a back stitch to secure your thread at the beginning or end of a row. Instead, you need to tie the thread ends together, both the elastic thread and the upper thread, with several knots, so the stitching can't come undone. You can do this right after you have sewn a few centimeters or an inch of a row, but I prefer to tie both the beginning and the end once I have finished an entire row. The fabric will want to pull together more and more with each new row you sew. To prevent it from bunching up right under the needle, I always make sure to pull the fabric straight by holding it both at the beginning and end of the piece. Here is how it looks when both the front and back pieces are fully shirred. Now it's time to sew the pieces together. I pin them right sides facing each other. If you were able to use just one large piece of fabric for your dress, you will only have one back seam to pin and sew here. But since I have a front and a back piece, I am pinning and sewing the two side seams. When I sew the upper shirred parts of the dress together, I am using a stitch specifically designed for elastic fabrics, along with a correct presser foot for that stitch. Most home sewing machines have these stitches, but if yours doesn't, you can simply use a zigzag stitch instead. The rest of the dress, the lower part that is not shirred, is sewn together with a regular straight stitch. Here is how it looks when the front and back are sewn together. And here is a picture of me wearing it, showing how this shirring holds everything perfectly. As you can see, the shirring is strong enough to hold up the dress, but I still prefer to add shoulder straps to feel extra secure and to hide my bra straps.
I want to make shirred shoulder straps to match the bodice. To find the right size, measure how long you want your strap to be and multiply that length by 1.5, just like we did with the bodice. For example, my needed length is 40 centimeters or 16 inches, so multiplied by 1.5, my fabric length will be 60 centimeters or 24 inches. For the width, you can choose what fits you best, but remember to add 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches so you can fold the edges in twice on each side. My target width is 6 centimeters, so I'm cutting my pieces 10 centimeters wide. When cutting, make sure the length of the strap runs across the fabric width and the width follows the grain line for the best stability.
After cutting my shoulder straps, I zigzag both the short edges on each strap. Then I fold in first 1 centimeter or 0.4 inches on each side of the width of each strap and press with my iron. Then I fold it 1 more centimeter or 0.4 inches and press again. Now the shoulder strap is about 6 centimeters or 2.5 inches wide, exactly as planned. I then sew a straight stitch near the fold. Here is how it looks with the short ends zigzagged and the long side edges sewn. Now it's time to shirr the shoulder straps. I'm opting to make 3 shirring rows. I measure 1 row down the middle of the band, which I mark with tailor's chalk. I will then sew 2 more rows using about a presser foot's width of distance from that middle row. So I don't draw all 3 lines, but I freehand a little. Here is how it looks when I'm sewing the shoulder straps. Once the shoulder straps are finished, I sew them onto the dress by hand using a needle and thread. Last but not least, we are going to hem the dress. I start by folding the hem up 2 centimeters or 0.8 inches, pressing it and then folding it up 2 more centimeters or 0.8 inches and pressing again. All that's left now is to sew the hem in place. Let's take a look at the final result.
That was all for today, but I really hope you liked this video, and if you did, please consider to like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to click that notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming content on my channel. But for now, bye! Have fun sewing!